it is so incredible that to solve the housing crisis in the Lower Sioux Indian community, they didn't just slap together, new construction from energy-intensive materials that will fall apart in a couple of decades. They instead learned to farm, which they've never done before, learned to process, which they hadn't done before, and then build homes from a material that barely anybody has done in the United States. I mean, it's such an incredible story of resilience, and I think that is so based upon who they are as a people and also what they have been through.
That's filmmaker Joel Caldwell, who tells the story of the Lower Sioux Indian community in the documentary film Green Buffalo. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Harlock.
And I'm Sophia Curzius. Welcome to the Hemp Show.
Today we're going to talk to filmmaker Joel Caldwell and Hempcrete builder Danny Desjarlais.
We'll hear about the film and why Caldwell was inspired to make it.
And how things have changed for Danny and the Hempcrete crew at the Lower Sioux.
We'll hear what it was like winning first place for short documentary at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, where Danny and Joel were surrounded by movie stars.
Plus, we'll hear about the International Hemp Building Symposium, which is to be held at the Lower Sioux Indian community this October, right after these messages. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com.
The KP4 Hemp Cutter, introducing a revolution in hemp harvesting, setting a new standard for harvesting quality, speed, and efficiency. The KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. Easy to maintain and designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting. The KP4 Hemp Cutter. Available only at hempcutter.com.
All right, welcome back. So I'm excited to hear this interview with Danny and Joel.
Me too. I can't wait to hear what you asked them about.
Well, yeah, let's just listen to the interview. Hello, Joel and Danny. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing good. Thanks for asking.
Joel Caldwell, you're a filmmaker. Most recently, you put out Green Buffalo, telling the story of the Lower Sioux and their Hempcrete projects. And Danny, you are Danny Desjarlais. You're the Hempcrete builder and manager of the Lower Sioux Hempcrete building crew. So welcome again. And I wonder if you could first, Joel, give us a quick introduction, and then we'll go to Danny.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here. So I'm an environmental storyteller, kind of photographer, writer, and filmmaker. And I've really been, the last bunch of years, I've been really interested in the things that we can kind of each individually do, as quote, ordinary people, not as necessarily captains of industries or government officials or presidents, etc. What we can each individually do to solve some of our environmental problems, to create a healthier, more regenerative, more alive planet. And so I did a lot of work around ecosystem restoration and rewilding, large-scale stories down to what we can plant in our yards individually and the change that makes. And then a couple of years ago, I went to a Hempcrete building workshop put on by April McGill of Root Down Building Collective here in Charleston, South Carolina, where I live. And I really just had the light turned on as far as this massive solution of being able to change from the building sector being the third largest emitter of CO2 globally and filling almost half of our landfills in the United States to instead, creating carbon banks and living in healthier homes, all things that you guys are well aware of and probably your listeners are too. But it was new to me at that point. And I just was so excited and
Right.
needed
Yeah,
to tell a
that
story
that
about it.
moment when you realize what is going on there with Hempcrete, it's like that's the thing we want to share with everybody, just that like aha moment.
Exactly.
So that's cool. We'll get into a bit more of that in a sec. So Danny, just a quick introduction as to you. Let people know who you are. Reintroduce yourself because you've been on our show a few times now.
Yeah, name's Danny Desjarlais. I'm with the Lower Sioux Indian community. We grow hemp here, we process hemp, and we also build houses out of hempcrete now. I came into this a conventional builder, and like Joel was saying, I had the light bulb go off as well. Mine was actually at a U.S. I can't remember, U.S. Hemp Building Summit is what it was down in Austin, Texas. And I kind of consider that the first day of the rest of my life. And I came into this as the conventional builder, always kind of like trying to find the bad in hempcrete, and I keep getting proven wrong. And so, we have a crew here that we build with, and we've kind of been learning as we go. And, we've taken a little piece from here and a little piece from there and kind of do it our own way now. And we just are planning on continue to rebuild our community, And
So you guys have been working together, I guess, for a year or two now on what turned out to be the Green Buffalo film. Joel, talk more about why you decided to tell the story of Hempcrete on the Lower Sioux. And you mentioned you're sort of in different mediums. Why you chose film to tell this story?
Yeah, kind of an interesting. I went to that hempcrete building workshop that I mentioned in Charleston, and like I think within hours of leaving that workshop, I had pitched Patagonia, who had been doing a lot of work for the idea of telling a story, and they were immediately enthusiastic about it. And they bought like a written story and photos from me. And as I was trying to report that story here in the Southeast, there's an incredible opportunity. There's an incredible story that's not quite there yet in the Southeast. This used to be the textile capital of the world. We grew cotton everywhere. That was really terrible for soil, etc. There's an opportunity to rejigger that whole industry went overseas, but there's an opportunity to rejigger that, grow hemp, replenish our soil and create these localized circular economies. But the producer just can't quite get set up. And then we got some bad seeds. And as Patagonia wants this story, things were really falling apart. And at that point, they were like, hey, this was selected to be a film as well. And it was literally at the same time that I was hearing the story in the Southeast was collapsing. And then I caught wind of what was happening on the Lower Sioux Indian community and basically was able to shift the whole story there.
Wasn't there an earlier Patagonia film featuring Patrick Brown, a farmer in North Carolina?
Yeah, there was. And I saw kind of an earlier cut of that somewhere along the line. And yeah, it's a great story. And I don't. Yeah, I think it was more about growing hemp, right, rather than building with it, if I remember correctly. And so I think
In
that
textiles, it was connected to the emerging textile.
he was growing on land that his family had historically been enslaved on, and it was land that they had bought back, and now he was bringing the soil back to life and everything through hemp and bringing the community back to life,
such
basically.
a powerful story.
And a very similar theme, different but very similar. So that brings us to you discovering Danny and the crew. How did that happen?
Yeah, I actually through my editor at Patagonia, it was actually a message from the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard. His daughter had seen, I think it was a Grist article, and it was sent to me through the chain through my editor, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this looks like such an incredible story. And so I quickly, got in touch with Danny, got in touch with Earl Pendleton,
The Earl of
and
Hemp.
just yeah, the Earl of Hemp exactly, and just started to report that story out and see if there was, you know, obviously when you're telling Eric, you'll know this, but when you're telling any story, you have to there have to be it can't just be at least especially when it comes to film, right? It can't just be a story that needs to be told, a story that's worth telling, right? It has to have so many different elements to get people to pay attention to it, right? And so I was able to come to the reservation, come to the community, and meet people, and photograph it, and write an article about it, and kind of like explore the potential for a film.
I'm curious about like it's a short documentary. It's like what, 19, 20 minutes long. So I'm curious how that sort of affects your process, or, are those kind of, boundaries, that structure there. Do you find that to be limiting to your storytelling, or is there some kind of freedom that having such a short, space to tell your story in?
What's interesting about this is we came with the budget and the understanding that we were going to make a film that was 8 to 12 minutes long. And what we found was so much story, and such a powerful story, that we made something twice or more than twice as long as what we intended. And that is rarely the case. I don't ever set out to tell a long story. I want to tell a story that, is distilled down to the most essential elements, to really tell a story that's as powerful as possible, that doesn't have a lot of extra. That doesn't mean it has to be like, every moment has to be hard hitting. Of course, the story has to breathe. It has to have room. But, I think to create a good documentary, right, you don't want a lot of just extra time. You don't want to just add a bunch of extra stuff. That's how you lose people's attention. You lose the thread a little bit. And so, no, I don't. I mean, yes, budget limitations. Like if you're budgeted to tell a shorter story, that can be really challenging. But generally, I don't think a shorter format is a bad thing. I mean, it all depends on where it's going to live. But yeah, we're dealing with people's attention spans these days, right? Which I don't want to cater to a short attention span, but I just feel like, yeah, film unfortunately it's such a money dependent. It's a fairly expensive thing to do, especially if you're trying to do it at any kind of a high level. And so I would never want to try to make it longer than it needs to be.
Okay, so maybe that cancels out my next question, but were there parts of the story that you would have told if you had more time?
I mean, you could dig so much deeper in different aspects of the story. I mean, I think obviously, in one sequence we basically explore 250 years of oppression, of the U.S. government's boot on the throat of the Dakota people, and we tried to do that as honestly and accurately as we could. But you could spend obviously so much more time exploring the history and why things are the way they are, and then why it is so incredible that to solve the housing crisis in the Lower Sioux Indian community, they didn't just slap together, new construction from energy intensive materials that will fall apart in a couple of decades. They instead learned to farm, which they've never done before, learned to process, which they hadn't done before, and then build homes from a material that barely anybody has done in the United States. I mean, it's such an incredible story of resilience, and I think that is so based upon who they are as a people, and also, what they have been through.
Yeah, I learned a whole lot more about the Lower Sioux when I was out on the reservation in September, out for the opening of the hemp campus. So I think you mentioned this, Joel, in sort of your introduction, but maybe we can get into it a little bit more. But is there like a philosophy that informs your work? Like, what's the through line?
Yeah, the through line is really, I just I want in whatever small way I can, I want to create a better planet, as like maybe uh, over the top or self-righteous as maybe that might sound. I don't know. I just like that's what I'm focused on. I here in Charleston, myself and a couple of friends have created a local and grassroots environmental group. I'm just interested in a healthier planet that is going to be a more joyful planet, that is going to be a more equitable planet. I just see that, like, and Hempcrete is the best example, right? Like, what's good for the natural environment is good for people. It's that simple. And we are living in such a degraded state. If you look around in our neighborhoods, if you look at where the Lower Sioux Indian community is, where everything is farmed within an inch of its life. Like we are just clinging on, and we are addicted to the bad news, and we're kind of like living out our dystopic future, and we need to unhook from that, and we need to look at the simple solutions that are all around us, to create ecological abundance and create abundance within our communities. And so that
Community,
is,
right? That's the key
yeah,
right there. Yep.
reconnect our communities. And I just think that is, I mean, there's no better thing to spend your career, to spend your life working towards, with a lot of humility that as one person, you're only going to do, so much, but that
But
is
you
the
got to
through
do
line,
something, right? You got to
right?
do something. Yeah.
And it's extremely cathartic to try to do something, even if you feel like you're unsuccessful. It's better than just to be buffeted by the bad news that comes in every day, I think.
Yeah.
So
Checking out some of your other films. I saw one called The Issue with Tissue, right? Sum up. What's the issue with toilet paper? I mean, I think I understand, but maybe talk about that film a little bit.
this took place in British Columbia, and there's a lot of greenwashing that, paper products, are just a byproduct of logging, right? It's like, well, we're cutting down these trees for lumber because people are demanding it to build homes, to build structures, et cetera. And so we're actually being more sustainable by using this byproduct, which is the pulp, which is the paper. And in reality, it's actually a co-product. You make these companies make huge amounts of money on paper products, and it drives unsustainable logging practices all over the world, especially in British Columbia, where they're continuing to cut down a lot of old growth forests. And so it was meant very much to be like a tongue in cheek film. We had this guy nerdy about nature who has blown up on social media, and he's really charismatic, and we had kind of had cast him as like a throwback, like sort of like host from like the nature host from like the 80s. And he was kind of like the investigative journalist who was breaking this story. We had a little bit of a hard time with the client, maybe sort of change. We had an agreed upon script, and they had kind of changed their mind partway through, which made things a little bit difficult.
Oh,
But
interesting. Yeah.
but I think we delivered the story a little bit there.
I don't know why, but the phrase green wiping comes into my mind there.
Totally. Yeah, but just use recycled toilet paper. That's the move. You don't need to get something from bamboo overseas. You certainly don't need to get some super soft thing, because that's going to be log fibers. That's going to be from virgin forest. Use recycled toilet paper. That's the takeaway.
Hemp paper? Can we get to hemp toilet paper? Can hemp wipe it all up? Anyway, Danny. Hello, Danny. Thank you, Joel. Back to you, though, too. So I love having two guests here. Sometimes it's challenging, but not today.
Me and Joel are like the odd couple. We go well together.
Are you Felix or are you Oscar? Who are you?
I guess I don't know. Joel.
I guess I aged myself with that question, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, so Danny, this Green Buffalo film, and that phrase Green Buffalo, that's a phrase that I first heard from you the very first time I spoke to you back in 2023. So how has the Green Buffalo film changed your life or the work that you're doing at the Lower Sioux? Because you guys are getting some recognition. What, you won a first place in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. That's exciting. So what's it been like for you, Danny?
I guess I wouldn't call it like life-changing or anything. It has changed a lot of things. I get a lot of requests to go and do these screenings or stuff like that, but that's kind of out of my realm. We're just doing our job, really. We're just rebuilding our community. Joel came, created a story about that, and the story's kind of taken off, but we're still here, trying to rebuild our community. It does feel really good to stop for a second maybe and smell the roses, because we are just so busy all the time, and it feels like we're overworked a lot of times, and the guys might get frustrated, I get frustrated, but then being able to see our work up on the big screen, that was like really rewarding, I guess. It was felt almost like emotional for me, I guess, when we were out in Santa Barbara and I was seeing the guys on the big screen. It was like, it just felt like a big pat on the back, not saying we're looking for a pat on the back, but it felt good, so. But as far as like work and stuff like that, nothing's changed here. We're still doing the exact same thing.
You're just cranking out panels at this point?
Yeah, so we've been doing blocks. We've been playing around with some blocks, and then now over the last couple weeks, we've actually started doing panels as well. And with going forward, we don't know exactly what the funding's going to look like, and so we might have almost jumped ahead a little bit, getting some of these products ready to go. But yeah, we'll see what happens over the next year.
Right, because you had a funding opportunity through a federal grant, and I imagine with I'm calling it the climate change in Washington, there's a freeze on federal money. So how does that affect what you guys are doing?
Past September, we were awarded just under $5 million to retrofit 30 existing homes in the community, and so we were going to retrofit those with blocks and with the sprayer, basically just whatever the project called for. And so we started making these blocks in our factory, and then the new administration took over and basically froze all of the funding. And so now we have to basically put a pause on that, and all of that's in limbo now. And so, yeah, we'll just wait and see. We're going to have to either start going for some private funding or figure out something else, maybe just start selling the products outside of the community and recoup that money.
Can you sort of briefly describe the housing situation / crisis in your community?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no like people living out on the streets, and there's not homeless people just walking around, but it's super overcrowding. The last HUD numbers said that we need 196 more homes in this community, and we only have 160 existing homes here, and so that is a crisis, and I think that's a crisis everywhere, not just in tribal communities, but all across America. I think housing is always the number one need, and you listen to any politician, that's always their campaign speech, and their campaign things is they're going to create more housing and more jobs. So it's really across the whole nation. It's not just here, but yeah, we definitely need the housing bad here.
Yeah, and what you're doing is an example of a thing that can create more jobs and more housing. So there's so many lessons from what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and most of the houses we have, even the 160 existing homes, they all need attention, and so this grant would have really helped get that started. But then even with the new builds that we do, we hope that it's all up to the customer. So if the community member doesn't want a Hempcrete home, say they want a conventional home, well, then that's what they're going to build, But we're hoping that most community members will want Hempcrete homes now, and then in turn we will, that's what we'll build for them.
Yeah, it will provide. So the film puts the story of the Dakota people front and center. Joel called it, the boot on the throat of the tribe by the federal government in the 19th century. And I learned a whole lot more about that when I was a guest there on the reservation. And that day, I'm crediting you for organizing this little field trip, because we went to the Intergenerational Incubation Center, right, which is right there in the center of the community, and it's this like kind of ultra modern. I don't know. It kind of feels like a library and a gym and a hotel and a community center. It's got all of these things, and it's, I don't know. Could you?
Studio.
Yeah, recording studio and like a bead workshop place, and yeah. Could you describe it for us?
Yeah, so that's our art incubator, and so it is a multi-generation building. And so right when you walk in, it's where all of the elders do their activities, and they have meals served every day. So kind of like a community gathering space, but then you also have the children there, coming there right after school gets done. A bus brings them all right there, and they have activities and, snacks and stuff for them there. And then they have different workshops to bring back the language, to teach them different crafts. And then they also have the recording studio, and so kids can, create music, and it's really just like an outlet for any of them to express themselves. There's a gym if they're into sports, there's a exercise facility, a beadwork place, a place where you can sew with full-size quilting machines, a pottery studio with I don't know how many spinning wheels and a full kiln. So the whole works. Basically anything a kid can imagine they can do in that art incubator.
Yeah, that's the incubation, right? Like the elders are seeding the hearts of the younger kids.
Yeah, and they offer everything, for the adults and the kids, and they even have classes where they're both involved in the same thing. They even have like chair yoga for the elders, and just all kinds of stuff for like certain things, like if they need forms filled out or something, they'll have people there, with certain forms that they might need to fill out for whatever it is, and they'll just help them through those types of things. It's just a really good resource for our community for sure.
Yeah, this is an example of just resiliency and hope. Then you took us to the agency and the museum there. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's ran by Father John, who's in the film. And so I think we took Joel and them out there as well, or maybe they went out on their own and spoke with Father John. I don't remember exactly how they got that interview, but yeah, I mean, that's that building that's still standing. When Grace is speaking in the film, talking about locking up our food in a warehouse, that warehouse is still there standing. It's like a historic monument basically at this point, and it's that's where the Minnesota Historic Society had the interpretive center. And so growing up as a kid, they had this center there, and we could ride our bikes there or whatever, and they would show like a film about how the settlers came, and it was just really this I don't know what you want to call it. We didn't really tell
white wiping.
I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to. But yeah, it definitely wasn't the full history. But now they definitely tell all of the real history as accurately as they can. And so, yeah, you got to experience that. You got to meet Father John and get to hear some of the stories. And I like it how when we bring a group out there, he says to them, all right, first, we'll show you this video, and then we can fight afterwards, then we can argue afterwards. And so, because that is kind of what it turns into almost a little bit, because we've been taught this one history our whole lives from school, and then we learn that there's actually another side to everything, and so the people that win the war, they get to tell the story, and it's usually not the full story, not saying our side was these big kumbaya people either, but there's a lot of bad stuff that happened to us as well. We weren't just these savage Indians that they claim. And so it's a really neat facility. There's trails that go all the way down to the Minnesota River that was actually old trading stops, like fur traders. It's right where the rivers converge there. And so there's a lot of history there, and we claim to have always, used this land and roamed through this land, and we didn't never claim it as our land. We didn't ever own land or anything in the old ways. And so we have a deep history here, and so it's still here. The interpretive center's still here. We're kind of stuck here now. We don't get to be nomadic and roam around the millions of acres that we had at one point. We're kind of stuck here on these. Anybody that comes here, they pretty much get that tour if they want it. Most people that come for the hemp tour, we definitely try and take them to the art incubator. And if somebody's available at the historic site, we try and get them out there too, in the warmer months anyway. So
I'm really grateful that you did. It was like that juxtaposition of this symbol of resiliency, right next to the history of the agency. It was like your tour was designed to make people's hearts break and grow. And I am just forever indebted to you for that, like personal growth that I received from you, like an absolute gift. And yeah.
It's not even designed like that, that's just what it is, that's just like, we didn't tell Joel to put anything in the story. That was his story that he wrote after coming here a few times, and,
Well, so you mentioned Father John Robertson. That's my next question was about him. Yeah, like talk about him a bit and like his role in the community, because I met him there, and it's like he sort of engaged our group in like deep and meaningful conversations, like about spirituality and history, and yeah, I walked away from that whole experience just like in awe, and Father John especially really like left a mark on me. So tell me a little bit more about him if you can, because yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about him.
Yeah, he's a very prominent figure in the community. He was always the pastor at the church, that's how he gets the name Father John. We even some people call him the Pope. And he's basically been the person that runs everybody's, that speaks at everybody's wedding, speaks at everybody's funeral, he's that guy in the community that's just, just always there, and so everybody's gathering, Father John's always there, even like graduation things or just anything, he's just always right there in the community. And yeah, he's just he's a great person, he's real spiritual, he might be a church person, but before then, he was actually a sun dancer and a real spiritual person, in our ways. And it just so happened that the people at the church took a liking to him and wanted him to go to, I don't know what kind of school you got to go to become a father or whatever, but he ended up doing that. He spent some time in Chicago and New York. He was actually in New York when 9/11 happened. And yeah, John's just he's a great person, he's actually married to my godmother, and so, but I mean, everybody in the community considers him family, whether it's uncle, grandpa, whatever you want to call him, that's just who he is in the community. So it's no surprise that you left feeling that way about him.
Yeah, there was just an amazing sense of community that I noticed just in the way people spoke to each other. Like it seemed that any younger person there would call an elder like the uncle or auntie or something like that, and just like it seemed like there was this whole level of respect among the generations that like I found really like I wish we had that in like whatever this society is here. I don't know if you can talk about sort of kind of like respect.
There definitely is, and that is kind of I'm pretty sure that is amongst like all indigenous or native people. That's kind of what we do. Older person, we call them uncle, auntie. Or they might actually even be your uncle or auntie. Because a lot of the people, there is real big families around here as well. But even the ones that aren't blood related, that's just the way it goes. Because that's how we do consider ourselves. We don't, there's words for it, and it's there is your immediate family, obviously, and then your families together creates a bigger family, and then the community as a whole is even a bigger family. And we actually have words. I'm not going to say them on here because I'm terrible with the Dakota language, but we actually have words, that describe that, and that's kind of how, how it's always historically been. It might have went away for a while, but it seems like we're coming back to that. Growing up as a kid, there really wasn't these kind of opportunities and these things like trying to bring the language back, and even knowing our culture, it was kind of wiped away, and so all of that's coming back now, and so it seems like the community is really becoming more of a community.
Cannabis loves community. That's one of the taglines on the show, right? That's the t-shirt.
Yeah, hemp is definitely doesn't discriminate, that's for sure. Loves everybody.
Yeah. Joel, how has this film changed your life?
I mean, yeah, such an opportunity. I mean, such an amazing opportunity to tell this story, to tell a story that um, is both important, very important from an environmental perspective, and then is also very important from a social justice, cultural, truth telling perspective as well. I mean, I feel so grateful. I don't think I've ever been able to fully report a story to this degree of completion, to write about it, to photograph it, to make a film about it. So it's very fulfilling when, you often feel restricted by time and budget and all these things. It just was and to get to know Danny and to get to know the crew. I mean, it's really been a wonderful experience. Um, and then sometimes environmental storytelling and environmental filmmaking can feel like an uphill battle. There's a lot of fatigue around the topic in some ways because life is hard enough and they kind of want to be entertained. They don't necessarily want to face up to some of the harsh realities. And so you're always trying to walk the line. I'm always trying to walk the line, right? About solutions driven storytelling, and also it needs to be entertaining to a degree, right? It's been just incredibly satisfying to see people get excited about the film, to see Patagonia, internally be so excited about the film and really promoting it. And then to go to the Santa Barbara International Film Festival and win the best short doc category, and to have Danny there, with me. I mean, it was just cool. It's just really satisfying. And, I was really busy leading up to going to the film festival, and I had no idea how big of a deal it was. But my mother-in-law was like, Angelina Jolie was just at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. And I was like, what? And then we get there and Danny and I have these filmmaker passes, and we can go in first everything. And we're watching Josh Brolin interview Timothy Chalamet. And then Adrian Brody is talking. It was just like a bizarre, so much of film working is actually like being in a dark place, huddled over a laptop, like you're Gollum in his cave. And so this was like one of the few moments in my experience of like, oh wow, this is actually like kind of bright and shiny for a second here, But our first screening was at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, who's going to get out of bed and come to a theater at 9 o'clock in the morning to watch nature shorts? And it was pretty crowded. And after the first screening, they had added another screening the final day of the festival, and invited us to the awards ceremony. And so yeah, I mean, life changing in that. I hope that the recognition that this film is getting, I'm most important to me is impact, right? I want people, when you present the Green Buffalo to a community that has had wildfire, to a place just north of Los Angeles, which just had, I don't know how many homes burn, and you're showing them like a fire resistant or fireproof building modality. I want people to understand this as like something that they need to do, and they need to vote with their dollars, and they need to push people to support the farmers to grow it, etc. That's the most important thing to me. And then also, I hope, that this allows me to continue to tell these stories, because it's hard to find funding for a film. It's hard to find an outlet for the film. There's lots of hoops you have to jump through to tell these important stories.
Yeah. Well, super grateful to Patagonia for providing some of these opportunities, right?
Absolutely. And at one more aside, we were there, and something like 25, 30 people from Patagonia came to the screening, and we went to a bar afterwards, and to look down the bar and see Danny, just like cutting it up with the CEO of Patagonia was a really amazing experience.
I hope you took a picture of that.
Yeah, I think we do have a photo.
Send me a picture.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's awesome. So the work that I do here, talking to people about hemp, has brought some of the most amazing people into my life. Danny's one of them. And you've also met Cameron McIntosh. He's one of our Hempcrete superheroes back here in Pennsylvania.
Not just in Pennsylvania, around the whole world.
Right. But he's ours here. He's from PA, so we're thankful to call him one of our own. But he's got some workshops coming up. I think in May, there's one here in PA. Danny, are you going to be at that one?
I don't know for sure. I was at the one last year, and I still say it was the best hemp workshop I've ever been a part of.
Was it the Italian water ice that really put it over there?
Yeah, it was. You were there. Yeah. So,
can you tell that story real quick? I'm sorry to bring it there.
No, we should. Yeah.
So what? Cameron was like, hey, man, go get some Italian water ice. And you're like, what is that?
Yeah. So I mean, what is water ice? And so I was like,
Sounds like a
isn't all
contradiction.
ice water? And so what is water ice? I still don't know. But yeah, we went and got some Italian ice. I don't know why
Rita's
you guys in
Italian water ice,
Pennsylvania
yeah.
call it water ice, but
He gave you the keys to his truck and he said, Eric, go show him where it is. So we navigated out to Boyertown and bought
yeah,
some
and it was
water
like for a
ice.
group of like 20 people too, and so and there's all different kinds of flavors and add-ons that you can do, and so we had no idea, what people are gonna like,
And it was all melted by the time we got it
and
back to
then
the.
and then I was depending on Eric to be my navigator, and we get lost like 3 times going a mile and a half or something.
I was telling stories. I was pointing at stuff, and I
Yeah.
like telling stories.
So,
Um,
but if I could add to what Joel was saying about, Patagonia, or, the film process, I don't want to like downplay it. When you asked me earlier if it's been life changing or whatever, I almost like feel bad that I don't have like this big amazing thing to come back with, because we are forever grateful for, the film and for Patagonia getting this exposure out there, and what a lady told me yesterday on the phone was, the work that you're doing, you might not see, or you might not feel like you're doing a difference or making a big enough impact at once, but one person could see that, and they could change the way they build, and it might save somebody's life down the road. Just the way she said it was almost like it can be very life changing, I guess, and so not just for us, because we're just still going to be here just doing our building stuff. We're not looking to be on any red carpets or anything, but it's definitely, I think that's the main takeaway for us, is that now we almost feel like a responsibility to go and continue to spread the word and the message, and we are only like Joel said, one person or whatever, but through this film, I think it can spread a lot further than just Joel going out into his community or me going out into my community. So I think that is huge. That's life changing, not just for Joel and I, but for anybody possibly that sees it, or potentially. So I think that's where I'm at with it. Anyway, I guess I felt bad too, because when we were meeting with the Patagonia people, Joel's their head of the film asked me the same question, and I almost felt bad because I didn't have this answer to tell him, like yes, but that is, that's even a better answer, I think.
I think the answer is in the work that you're already doing, right?
Right.
It's just like,
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. We're not gonna change anything. We're gonna be here, and that's all we're doing. In the film, I say our crew is nothing special, and what I mean by that is, we're not building scientist people. We're not these architects and engineers. We're just some guys that are building, that are just doing it. And so, if the architects and engineers and the building science people and they actually got into it, it would really take off. This would go to the next level, and so that's what I meant in the film by that as well. It's really just a matter of doing it. That's all. That's what's special about it, is that we're doing it. And hats off to Earl for having that vision. And being able to keep pushing that too. Because that's really why we are where we're at. Is our prior leadership, and then our current leadership continues to invest. And so it's a full team effort, and then just this film is like
it's special.
a big catalyst that'll just spread it out further, I suppose.
All right, well, let's leave it right there. Thank you so much for sharing stories with me today, Danny and Joel, and thank you so much for making this film. And yeah, I wish you both just good luck in the future, and I'm sure we will talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for the work that you do, because it's like I said, you were a resource for me. When I was learning about the what Danny and his crew were doing, and yeah, the grassroots storytelling, is absolutely essential. I mean, it puts people that are doing important work on the map, and so keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. You're the man.
That was Danny Desjarlais and Joel Caldwell. My name is Sophia Curzius. Thank you so much for listening to The Hemp Show by Lancaster Farming, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. If you have any questions or comments, you can always reach us by email at podcast@lancasterfarming.com and get the latest farming news on our website. And sign up for the hemp newsletter while you're there. Until next time, we'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock and Sophia Curzius. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tim Bird Shadow.